prepare yourself for the 2025 Halloween special from the Warning Woods. This is Act 1. Act 2 will find you on October 30th, and the story will conclude with Act 3 on October 31st, Halloween. Without further ado, please enjoy the Crutchfield Estate, Act 1. I trade in secrets. I hold very few of my own, but I possess knowledge that could overturn stock markets and upset geopolitics. I can be a man of great influence, but you wouldn't know my name. On paper, I'm an attorney, but many of the purposes for which my clients utilize me fall outside of what you might consider legal bounds. As an attorney for the rich, both infamous and anonymous, secrets come with the territory. I find the easiest way to keep them is not to talk at all. The sorts of things I know could easily slip out, be betrayed by a slight hesitation or a fleeting expression. For this reason, I generally keep to myself. So why am I opening up now? Why am I talking? Truthfully, I may not be long for this world. Before I go, I think I'd like to shake things up a little bit, to give you all some insight into the forces that really drive this world. On Wednesday, October 9th, a client of mine who I will call Lawrence Crutchfield came to my office with a small cigar box and a request to amend his last will and testament. An amendment? Shouldn't be a problem. I hope everything's all right between you and Adele, I said, referring to his wife to whom the entire Crutchfield estate would fall on the event of his passing. Lawrence probably thought I was concerned for his marriage, but it was his life I was thinking of. Many clients with wills similar to his experience sudden and unexpected deaths soon after filing them. "Oh no, everything's just fine with Adele," Lawrence replied with phony laughter. He said, "I don't want to change where anything goes after I die. I just want to add a statement or whatever you would include to keep someone out of a will." I asked, "Do you mean a beneficiary who might succeed Adele if she, heaven forbid, should pass as well?" Lawrence looked visibly uncomfortable as he slid into the chair across from me. "I guess so. I just want to make sure there isn't any chance anyone claiming to be my child or my wife's can claim any part of my estate." I'm sure my eyebrows must have reached my receding hairline as I said, "I wasn't aware you had any children." Lawrence replied, "I said claiming to be my child. That's an important specification. Look, Rollins, I know it sounds odd, but you're just going to have to forgive me for not saying more. I know you're discreet, and I'd appreciate that discretion here. I'd rather you and I be the only ones who know about this." I said, "So Adele doesn't..." Lawrence interrupted. "No, she doesn't know I'm here. Really, Rollins, I can't say any more." I told him I'd find the papers and be right back. On my way to my office door, I heard Lawrence make a guttural noise and looked back. He held up his wooden box. Something small clattered inside. "One more thing, Rollins," he said, twisting in his chair to look at me. I asked, "What is it?" referring both to his request and the item inside the box. He asked, "You still have those safe deposit boxes downstairs?" He was referring to the wall of safety deposit boxes in my basement, where some of my clients trusted me to store items they did not trust at the bank. I told him yes, and that I still had a few boxes available. "This box," he said, waving the cigar box at me again. "I don't want anyone but us to know it even exists. I don't care if it stays locked up forever. I just want to be absolutely certain nobody else knows where to find it and that it never sees the light of day again." "May I know what's inside?" I asked. He said, "I'd rather you not." Now, I mentioned I hold many secrets. What I did not mention is how much I relish those secrets. I, for better or worse, am someone who enjoys knowing things. Does it probably put a target on my back? Does it make some very powerful people a bit anxious around me? Most assuredly. However, I keep from feeling any anxiety myself by maintaining my trustworthy reputation. I could make a healthy living doing more mundane work for more typical people. But sometimes I think it is the secrets that tempt me to keep operating in the shadows. It is the secrets which keep me alive. I said to Lawrence, if I'm to be the sole proprietor of this box which will be stored in my home, amongst coveted items of many people more powerful than you, I'll add, I'll need to see what's inside first. Lawrence clutched his jaw, the corners of his lips twitching with suppressed anger. But after only a few seconds, he sighed and said, "All right then, it's a key." He lifted the lid off the box, releasing a mildewy odor, and showed me a large brass key with a black ribbon tied to the end. I asked, "Do I get to know what it opens?" Lawrence shook his head as if disappointed in me for asking. I nodded, understanding. "Actually," Lawrence said, "if you don't mind, I'd like to see this key locked up before we work on the adjustment to my will. It would help me think a little bit clearer, put my mind at ease." "Just so I know what to expect," I said. "There isn't going to be anyone looking for this, is there? Anyone who might come here in their search?" "No, Rollins, no need to worry about that. There's only one other person on this planet who knows this key exists, and if anything happens to me, it will fall to her anyway. I imagine she'll be perfectly content to let you hold on to it." "So Adele does know you're here," I said. Lawrence said, She knows about the key and what it's for. She doesn't need to know it's here unless something happens to me." I asked no further questions. Instead, I led Lawrence to my basement and let him watch me lock his box away. You may, by now, have guessed the key in Lawrence's cigar box possessed some significance, and that I should have pried harder at him before taking it into my custody. But what you must understand is how utterly ordinary this meeting with Lawrence seemed at the time. I'm used to my clients entrusting me with bizarre items and requests. More than one of the items locked away in my basement are heirlooms my clients have left out of wills so as not to let them fall into the hands of troubled children or wayward spouses. I'm also well used to my clients acting dodgy, withholding information. As the saying goes, this was just another day at the office. If I've made it seem at all out of the ordinary, it is only due to my recollection being recolored by the knowledge I later gained about exactly what Lawrence had entrusted me to keep. Not 2 weeks later, Lawrence Crutchfield suffered a fatal aneurysm while driving his wife through the countryside near their remote estate. He owned roughly 100 acres in the country, which included his mansion, an extensive garage, and a 9-hole golf course that he built with a construction company he owned. Lawrence and Adele liked to go for long rides in his Porsche through the surrounding countryside, and it was on one of these pleasure cruises that Lawrence lost his life and nearly took Adele with him. He'd been going 70 when the aneurysm shut him down. The Porsche flew across the opposite lane, over the ditch, and played pinball in the bordering woods before being forced to a stop by a 300-year-old tree. Lawrence was pronounced dead at the scene, and Adele was rushed to the hospital with injuries exacerbated by the roughly 90 minutes which passed before anyone found them. As outlined in his will, Lawrence's body was cremated 3 days later. Adele called me from the hospital to ask if I had the box Lawrence wanted to lock up. Since he told me she knew about the cigar box and key, I assured her they were safe, and then discussed a few of the pressing details in his will, mostly regarding his funeral. She told me she would postpone his funeral until she was back on her feet. Although she sustained severe injuries, the doctor gave her a hopeful prognosis. In the meantime, Lawrence's ashes came to me. Again, these are the sorts of arrangements my clients make. Many of the rich fear their extended families and would rather trust their remains to someone they are paying than anyone related to them by blood. I don't enjoy being in this position, but it is one I often find myself in. I put the urn in the basement room adjacent to the safe boxes and went upstairs for dinner. Lawrence Crutchfield did not cross my mind again until after I'd fallen asleep. I woke before my alarm rang the following morning. My body is trained to wake at a regular time and rarely needs assistance. Operating with such regularity helps make one a more dependable person, and if I'm not dependable, I am nothing. I stretched, then swung my legs over the side of my bed and walked to my bathroom to take a cold shower. Nothing wakes me up better than 3 minutes of icy water trickling down my skin. It is unpleasant, but those 3 minutes give me an extra hour of productivity that I would otherwise spend in a groggy state. I refuse to get addicted to caffeine and must find alternative methods of enlivening my mind and body in the morning. I opened my bathroom door to find, instead, a dark, entirely concrete hallway in which I could somehow see despite the absence of any light. I closed my eyes, drew in a long breath, then opened them again. The hallway remained. Waking had felt so real, but I decided I must still be dreaming and, sheerly out of curiosity, I passed through the door. Not a moment after stepping through, my bedroom disappeared behind me. The doorway became more hallway, stretching back as far as the ghostly light allowed me to see. It smelled like soil and fungus. If not for the certainty I was dreaming, I would have worried about breathing in mold spores. I started down the hallway without any expectations. I wanted the dream to take me where it wished. I realized as I walked that I possessed full control over my thoughts and actions. Lucid dreaming is something I had pursued before with mixed results, but this time I found consciousness within the dream so quickly and effortlessly it caught me by surprise. In my past experiences, the moment I gained consciousness, the dreams evaporated. Something about this dream held me so tight I wasn't sure I could leave it if I wanted to. I tired of the seemingly infinite hallway after what might have been 5 or 10 minutes. I doubt it was any longer, but wouldn't be surprised to learn so. At that point, I attempted to free myself of the dream, but as I feared, I found it would not release me. Rather than panic and flounder, I pushed on in search of an exit or escape, and before long I discovered a door. An orange light that pulsed with an uneven, natural rhythm glowed around its edge. The smell of wood smoke intensified the closer I stood. I reached for the handle, but the door started opening before I touched it. It swung slowly inward, releasing a wave of heat. Smoke billowed out, burning my lungs and making me cough forcefully. I wondered if my unconscious body was coughing as well. Behind the door, I found another hallway, this one engulfed by roaring flames. I recognized it as the upstairs to my house through the vortex of heat and light, the impenetrable inferno. Then a horrible idea occurred to me. What if this vision of my burning hallway had leaked into my dream due to a real sensory input? What if the smoke I smelled was real, and this is how my brain was telling me to wake up? I threw the door open and charged into the fire. I dodged my way through the flames, still choking on the smoke as if it were real, until I found my bedroom door. The frame around it had blackened and curled with striped white charcoal at its edges. The door itself sprouted active flames which lashed out at me, daring me to attempt to enter the room they guarded. I'd already committed, and thus far the fire had not harmed anything but my lungs. I lunged for the doorknob, twisted it, and collapsed into my bedroom. There I saw myself on the bed, still and unaware. The bedroom had not yet caught flames, but smoke now billowed in, blackening the faint light from the crack in the curtain until I could no longer see myself. I went to the light switch, praying the electricity had not shut off yet. I flicked the light switch, but the lights did not brighten the room enough to waken me. I moved across the room to the bathroom, where I turned on the rattly overhead fan and began slamming the door repeatedly. Still, I failed to wake myself. I stumbled on the idea that I could not wake while my consciousness roamed. I rushed toward my bed in order to reunite my soul with my body, not knowing how I might do such a thing. I reached down, pulled the blankets off of myself, and touched something warm and squirming I did not expect to find. I grabbed the thing and pulled it toward me through the smoke until I could see it clearly. A baby. Practically a newborn infant wriggled joyfully in my hands. I became lost in its big brown eyes, mesmerized by the odd maturity I saw there. So lost I became, I did not notice the smoke dissipate, the flames cool and vanish, and the room transform once more into the infinite hallway. The baby in my hands wriggled until I couldn't help but set it down. To my surprise, it stood evenly on both feet as if it had sprung from the womb able to walk. Worse still, it pointed, directing me to continue down the hallway. Doubts sprang into my mind about the validity of anything I'd seen thus far, which allowed me to relax somewhat. It's hard to relax with a days-old baby following you, though. The child walked me to the very end of the hall where another door waited. This one didn't smell like smoke or glow with firelight. It looked like solid steel with a bolt lock and simple handle, like a door one might see in a meat locker or on a walk-in freezer. I tried to open it, but found it locked. Something nudged my hand and I looked down. The child stood next to me. He, I think it was a boy, took my hand in both of his, folded my fingers closed, then pushed my hand up toward me. I lifted it, opened my fingers, and there in my palm I found the brass key with the black ribbon tied around it. I recognized it immediately. The faint light of the hallway pronounced the key's pockmarks and tarnish. It had looked so placid and harmless in Lawrence's cigar box, but in my hand now, it looked like a totem of pure evil. The child walked with his creepily even steps to the door in front of me. He pointed a chubby finger and touched the bolt lock, then looked back at me expectantly. Unsure whether I remained in control of myself, I stepped forward and inserted the key. When I hesitated to turn it, a look of fury and disgust flashed across the infant's face. It froze like that, making an expression which implied he was about to cry. I sensed a serious threat behind the child's eyes as it gazed up at me with its face wrenched that way. I feared it would do much more than scream at me if I refused to turn the key. Again, thinking this was only a dream, I turned the key slowly, feeling every grating vibration as the bolt slid. It released with a thunk, and the child eagerly jumped up to twist the doorknob. As soon as the door opened a crack, the child dropped from the knob and landed on all fours, then scurried through the door like a rodent. The door stopped swinging, partially open. I peered through it, wondering where the child ran off to, but there was no light inside the next room at all. Not even the ghostly light of the hallway bled into the impenetrable darkness beyond this threshold. I pushed the door the rest of the way open in hopes I might allow more light in, but it did no good. "Please," I heard a voice rasp in the shadows. It was too deep, too old to belong to the child. It clearly belonged to a grown man. "Hello?" I called out, not moving any closer. "Please get me out of here," the voice spoke again. I said, "I can't see you. Come toward me." The voice whispered, "He has me. I can't get away." "The baby?" I asked. No answer came. Two yellow lights lit up at what I assumed to be the back of the room. They rose into the air. The shadows filling the room coalesced around them, moving in reverse. As the shadows coalesced into the figure, the rest of the room became visible, slowly at first, but then exponentially faster. I soon began to notice a shape, a bundle of some sort resting in the center of the floor. Only when most of the shadows had joined the figure at the back could I tell the bundle was a man. And only once every last wisp of blackness had been absorbed could I tell the man was me. Me sat on his knees with his hands behind his back, head bowed forward, not in reverence, but exhaustion. Slowly, he raised his head. His eyes looked bloodshot, his irises pushing into the redness, desperate for light. He looked like he hadn't eaten or drank anything for days. His repulsively greasy hair stuck straight up in the back. "I can't get away," the other me muttered. You have to help me." "How did you get here?" I asked. "Tell me and I'll—" The figure behind him lurched forward. Its feet remained planted, but its hulking shoulders bent toward the other me on the ground. One of its hands grasped the tuft of hair sticking up and yanked it backward. Wheezing, the other me cried, "You're already here. It already has you. You have to bring the key. It's the only—" He sucked in a strangled breath. "The only way." "Where do I bring it?" I asked, truly wanting to know. The creature's eyes rose to meet mine, and suddenly I knew what the other me had meant when he said it already had me. I felt its influence stir inside me like a festering brood of worms. I'd allowed Lawrence to bring this thing into my house, and it had infected me. What was the key for, and why had Lawrence been so unwilling to tell me? The door to the other me's cell banged shut. I felt myself ripped backwards, my heels sliding across the stony floor by some force without regard for my will. We passed the door to my burning room and continued beyond where I thought I'd entered the dream. I felt myself lifted up, and suddenly my feet dangled below me. They knocked against rungs of a cold steel ladder, more shiny than I would have expected in such a dank, dark place. A brief squealing sound, then light shone down upon me. The dream hoisted me out of a circular hole, then dropped me gracelessly onto my back. I scrambled to my feet, prepared to flee from that dark creature which absorbed all the shadows. When I turned around, I saw nothing there. Nothing but a manhole cover in the grass. Leafless trees surrounded me. Beyond them, I saw clearly, even under the darkness of night, a golf course. I looked down and saw I was standing less than 10 feet from a sand trap. I called out, but unsurprisingly, no one answered. I tried to take a step, but tripped over a gnarled tree root protruding from the ground. I looked up and saw the rest of the tree, equally twisted and lumpy. Before risking another step, I glanced around and saw that many, if not most, of the tree roots were bulging out of the dirt as if the trees might uproot themselves and run away, or close in. This became my last observation before the dream flickered away with a blink of my eyes as I awoke. I found myself not in bed, but standing in my bathroom, hands on the sink as I leaned toward the mirror. The face reflected there matched the face I saw in the cell in the dream. My own, but haggard, sunken, and broken. Without parting his lips, my reflection screamed, "Bring the key!" I re-entered reality, opening my eyes in my bed. But I swear, to this day, that scream still echoed in the bathroom. I'm not imaginative enough to make any of this up. You might imagine that in my line of work it benefits one not to be paranoid or anxious. I contend it is quite the opposite. To guard the secrets and treasures of the elite, one must be extraordinarily paranoid, and while maybe not anxious, cautious at the very least. Paranoia allows you to confront possibilities you otherwise might not have imagined. If you can harness it, know how to control it, and wield it, it can be quite the motivator. My dream, which seemed to blend so effortlessly with reality, triggered a fresh bout of paranoia in me. I spent the entire morning wondering whether I might have received the visions not from my subconscious, but rather something less metaphorically below me, in my basement. If such a force could control my dreams, what else could it do? A single factor prevented me from acting that day: my previously maintained disbelief in the supernatural. I wasn't about to give that up over a nightmare and a mild suspicion. I spent the remainder of the day conducting business which you have no business knowing about. But that night, as I slept, the vision haunted me again. This time it started with a still image of that manhole in the grass surrounded by knobby trees next to the golf course. I quickly descended into the faintly lit hallway. There was the glowing door, which opened into my flaming bedroom again. Once more I could taste smoke, but this time I knew it to be dream material only. Once lucid enough to take control, I rushed to my bedside, tried to wake myself. This time, Dream Me sat up straight, which I fully expected to tear me away from the dream. Instead, I remained to watch Dream Me turn his head slowly in my direction, eyes still shut. A column of flame suddenly crackled at higher volume, defining itself against the others. A great boom followed, signaling the collapse of one of the bedroom walls. The roof sagged. The flames began chewing through it. My other self's eyes flashed open. He leaned toward me with his arms held outward, palms up. His mouth dropped open, and he began to gleefully chant, "Look at me, the devil's skin bag. Look at me, the devil's skin bag." I tried to back away, but he grabbed hold of my wrist before I even noticed him move, his gleeful grin replaced by a scowl. He snarled in a voice not my own, "You'll be dead by your birthday, skin bag." I broke free and ran from the room, slamming the door behind me. I just stood there, panting for some time. My birthday, October 31st, was only 3 days away. The door at the far end of the hallway swung open on its own. My vision zoomed in on it for me. I saw myself in that room again, on my knees, hands bound behind my back. I looked into my eyes and found them full of terror and despair. Once more, that shadowy creature loomed behind the other me, its eyes burning. This time, its hands reached forward and grasped my other self's face. Its fingers dug into his eyes, nose, and mouth and pulled as if to rip his head in two. As he fought off the ripping fingers, the other me screamed, "Bring the key! Bring the key before it's too late!" Everything froze then. I remained lucid, but unable to control how I moved in the dream any longer. Locked in place, I was forced to stare down the hallway at myself, losing to that awful shadow figure. I could do nothing but stare into my own petrified eyes as the figure tore my twin self's head in two. My separated jaws looked like a flower, my opened throat a spasming red fountain. Some particularly violent spurts of blood indicated I was still trying to breathe. I screamed and woke up in my bed. 6 hours had passed. I now had the proof I needed to entertain my paranoia. For the first time in my life, I considered the possibility of a supernatural influence, something connected to the key Lawrence Crutchfield asked me to store before he died. It occurred to me the dreams began after I brought Lawrence's ashes home, not after he brought me the key, but I fixated on the key due to its importance in both nights' visions. It seemed to be, forgive me, the key to solving whatever was going on. Perhaps Lawrence had been similarly tormented before his demise, and by bringing his remains into my home, I set the force's sights upon myself. We'd arranged my storing of Lawrence's key via nothing more than a verbal agreement. His last will and testament contained no reference to the key at all. With Adele Crutchfield still hospitalized, I could not in good conscience pass the cigar box along to her. Not yet. What if the strange visions took hold of an innocent nurse, doctor, or patient? I thought, what better place to move it than the Crutchfield's currently vacant home? I could warn Adele about it, if she didn't know about its curse already, but I was under no obligation to. I believe Lawrence had once mentioned a close friend of theirs, a man of the cloth. Either way, I felt sure Adele, with all her resources, could find someone to help her deal with whatever power the key held or represented. I decided on this course of action and secreted the cigar box out of my basement. It made me nervous placing it in my car to drive out to the Crutchfield's country estate, but I kept reminding myself that Lawrence had successfully brought it to me. Lawrence. On my way out, I brought his gold urn with me. I did have a contractual agreement to hold his ashes for Adele, but what would she do? Sue me? What judge would bother hearing that case? I reversed his trip without issue. Tall red flags scattered around the property caught my attention as I drove up the Crutchfield's long driveway. I had forgotten about Lawrence's personal 9-hole course. I couldn't say for certain whether it resembled the golf course in my dream, but what a coincidence. Leaving the cigar box in my passenger seat, I skirted the enormous house for a better view of the entire course. And there, staring across at the furthest end of the course, I saw it. The knobby grove of trees, the very same from my visions. Although not a betting man, I would have staked my entire net worth that I would find a manhole amid their roots. I feared I may have entered yet another dream. I worried I might wake again in my bed at any moment. Although I'd done business with Lawrence Crutchfield for nearly a decade, I had never been to his home or seen his property. His golf course was merely a few months old. Surely I could not have seen many images, if any, which included it. My confusion at the uncannily familiar sight slowly evolved into dread about what it meant. I could doubt supernatural interference no longer. I found a golf cart parked next to the garage with the keys left in it. I set the cigar box and urn beside me in the seat and rode down to the knobby grove. The grass surrounding the trees came as high as my knees, even though the rest of the golf course and lawn looked immaculate. I guessed the Crutchfields had instructed their groundskeeper to leave the grove alone. Lawrence wouldn't have wanted him to stumble upon what I was looking for there. The manhole cover. I found it. In the middle of those leafless trees, I discovered the cast iron plate which I had seen twice in visions and never anywhere else. Now I had to wrestle with the decision to open it or not. A padlock I had not seen in the dream secured the cover, but there was a second key hanging from the golf cart's key ring that matched the lock's brand. When I considered the rest of what I saw in those dreams, the decision actually came quite easily. Lawrence Crutchfield was dead. What did it matter to him if I took his key down there and left it for whatever force now had its claws in me instead of leaving it in the house as I originally intended? I kept connecting the key he left me that day with his worry about someone trying to claim his inheritance. He never made any statement which actually linked the two. He'd brought me the key that day for convenience's sake. I reminded myself I had no legal obligation regarding the key. After going through this round of reasoning, I unlocked the manhole cover and descended the all-too-familiar ladder into the equally and terribly familiar hallway in the underground tunnel. I almost dropped Lawrence's remains at one point. A little bit of him slipped out and cascaded into the darkness. I believe most people would have described the tunnel as a bunker. Since I left the cover off, enough ambient light shone down to illuminate it. It matched what I saw in my dreams, in that the walls, floor, and ceiling were all made of concrete. But in the real tunnel, only one door waited for me at the end. The side door, which always led to my burning bedroom, did not really exist, and where it always stood in the dream, I saw a tall wooden cross mounted to the concrete instead. There were other symbols lining the walls as well, none of which I'd been shown in the visions. I cannot tell you whether they were religious or pagan. They were likely a mixture of both, but I will just say they did not appear to be decorative. They varied in size and material. Some, like the cross, were sculptures or monograms, and others were merely paintings and drawings. More symbols drawn in wax lined the floor all the way to the door at the far end. It felt like I'd just dropped into the tomb of a pharaoh, and in fact, some of the symbols did look Egyptian. I wondered why none of them had appeared in my dreams. I approached the door with great apprehension, careful not to smear any of the symbols on the floor with my shoes. The brass lock set looked much older than the rest of the steel door. I thought the original lock set must have been replaced, but why? I opened the cigar box and stared at the key for a few seconds before taking it out. It must have been my imagination, but I swore I could feel the key pulling itself toward the lock like a magnet. I held them close together, comparing their metals, and saw they matched. I felt certain this door was what the key opened, the final barrier between me and whatever waited on the other side. My memory of that looming shadow creature whispered into my thoughts. It seemed impossible such a creature could actually exist, so I did not truly expect to see it if I opened the door, but I feared whatever it represented. Something on the other side wanted me to open that door. It had threatened my life to coerce me. Bring the key, my dream self had instructed. I checked, but there was no room to slide the key under the door. In order to complete my charge, I would have to open it. I decided to simply get it over with. I inserted the key and twisted. It rotated easier than I expected for such an old lock and such a heavy-set door. The bolt opened with a deep pop. I gave the key a quarter turn back and removed it. Then I twisted the knob. There were no lights in the room. It was completely black until some of the faint light from the tunnel entered through the partially open door. I held my breath and waited for something to happen. After a few moments passed in silence and stillness, I placed the key back in the cigar box and gently kicked it into the room. It slid across the floor, coming to rest at the edge of the light. Nothing but curiosity prevented me from slamming that door shut and evacuating the tunnel immediately, but my curiosity is a powerful force. I waited for 5, then 10 seconds. Just after I accepted that nothing would happen, I heard a soft sliding sound in the darkness. Then I wanted to run but could not. Like an animal cornered by a wild predator, I froze, hoping I might not be noticed. The sliding sound became small scratching noises, and just beyond the light, I noticed motion near the floor. A small form began to emerge, but when it reached the edge of the light, it stopped. It was an infant, an actual human baby. I recalled the infant who led me in my first dream, but that baby looked different than this one. This one's skin hung purple from its bones, and its eyes seemed to pop out from their sunken sockets. It looked like a living carcass. It locked eyes with me. I felt the urn slip out from under my arm, but could do nothing to stop it. I remained completely frozen. The infant reached one skeletal hand into the light and touched the box while keeping eye contact with me. Its tiny fingers drew the box back into the shadows. They both disappeared. I shut the door, leapt over Lawrence's scattered ashes, and ran. I didn't bother to secure the padlock on the manhole cover before driving off. Not once, looking back. This concludes Act 1 of the Crutchfield estate. If you're enjoying the story, please rate, like, review, or subscribe. For early, ad-free episodes and behind-the-scenes episodes I call Into the Woods, become a patron at patreon.com/thewarningwoods. You can also support the show by purchasing merch. The merch store and Patreon links are in this episode's description. To stay up to date, follow me on Instagram and TikTok at The Warning Woods. When you feel ready, meet me here for another journey into The Warning Woods. Thank you for listening.